All right, we're recording live.
Yep.
Okay, so welcome to episode 7 of the 505 cast. I am overjoyed to be here with Pip Pearson, who, in addition to a whole lot of other stuff, is probably the subject of sailing's greatest story, or at least one of them, certainly. He's been the international class president, the Australian class president, been to a gajillion worlds, has already told me a bunch of great stories I didn't know, and this ought to be an awesome one. Thank you so much, Pip, for joining, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so let's just jump right in. You grew up in Adelaide, Australia, and how did you get involved in sailing?
Well, how I get involved in sailing, as is the case in Australia with most kids back in my era through the 50s and 60s and that, we all played a summer sport and a winter sport. And I played lacrosse in the winter, and I was a tennis player in the summer. But all my good mates from the lacrosse club, they raced yachts in the summertime. And when I got to be a middle, late teenager, one of the club members was looking for a new crew, and I always missed my lacrosse mates in summer. And they approached me this year and said, "Hey, look, how about quitting lacrosse and coming in? How about quitting tennis and coming down to the yacht club and try your hand at sailing?" And I was doing fairly well at tennis, and I was a bit reluctant to stop, but peer group pressure, and all my lacrosse mates were a few years older than me. I was the young guy in the group. So in the summer of 1960-61 was my first year, so I was 16 and a half. I hopped on the trapeze of a 505 without any junior training, any knowledge of sailing whatsoever. So I stepped off a tennis court in the trapeze of a 505 and remained there for 52 years.
Well said, well said. All right.
So then going from 60 to, I'll give you the whole story if you like, if you got time.
Oh yeah.
In 1963, we sent a team from Australia to compete in the Worlds in not Hyannis, in Larchmont.
Yeah.
Larchmont Yacht Club, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, to everybody's surprise, Brian Price and Chris Huff won the World Series. And Chris Huff, the crew, was one of my mates from the Brighton Lacrosse Club who had conversed me to come and try sailing. So with them having won the Worlds in 1963, they all got excited and said, "Hey, look, we better send a team to Ireland next year in 1964 and put in a bid to host the Worlds back in our own hometown, Adelaide. Having won a World Series, that would give us our leg in the door to be the host for a couple of years coming up." So in 1964, Brian Price couldn't go and defend his own title, but the association sent John Parrington over to Ireland to compete in the 64 Worlds. And because Chris Huff had been the crew for Brian Price, the association decided that, well, maybe Huffy, being the crew, should defend his title and crew for John Parrington. Well, in the 2 years prior to that, I started my sailing with John Parrington in 60-61. So I spent 2.5 seasons with John, and then that got interrupted when he went off to Ireland and sailed in the Worlds with Chris Huff, which they also won. And at the annual general meeting in Ireland, he put in a bid to host the Worlds in Adelaide in 1966, which was 2 years hence. I think 1965, from memory, the Worlds went to Argentina, which was run by Larry Marks. So we won that bid to host it in Adelaide in 1966. And John Parrington, my skipper, because he had won the Worlds, and he was I think at the time he was a president of the Australian Yachting Federation. Back in those days it was the AYF. he decided that he wouldn't race in this regatta in Adelaide. He would be the OOD, officer of the day, now called the race officer.
Right.
So that left me in the lurch with no one to sail with. But our club had undergone major changes to be big enough to host the events, and I was actually running the bar at the yacht club and doing all kinds of volunteer work. So I was going to be working at the club. When I say working, as a volunteer, running the bar. And so they thought that for a bit of prestige, they should try and get Paul Elsom over there. Well, in the meantime, Paul had already contacted his crew from his previous 2 successful World Series in 1950, I think it's 55 and 56, or maybe 54, 55. Pierre Poulin from France.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd contacted Pierre and said, hey, Paul, Pierre, how about coming to Australia next year and we'll have a 3rd crack at the Worlds? Which Pierre said, fine, let's do it. So on the day they arrived in Australia, Pierre Poulin's father in France died, and he had to about turn and go back to France, which left Paul Elsom without a crew. Well, I was the only bloke at the yacht club who had had any experience in sailing 505s, and they asked me if I would crew for Paul in the pre-Worlds to give him time to get his Elstrom sales manager from Sydney to come across and crew for him for the World Series. I said, yeah, sure, I can help him out. So I went out and had a couple of sails with Paul before the events, and then we raced the first couple of races in the pre-Worlds, which was in the Australian Championships. And after the second day, Paul said to me, look, would you be happy to crew for me for the rest of the series in the Worlds? I said, yeah, sure. So he rang up his Elstrom manager in Sydney. He said, look, sorry, mate, I'm all organised now. I don't need you. So I was only 21 then. But my only sailing experience had been in 505s, but despite that, mate, I was very wet behind the ears. I knew absolutely bugger all. And back in those days, skippers and crews, it was a different era than today. The skipper was very much Captain Bligh, and the crews were to be seen and not heard, to a large extent. And I never really got taught anything about sailing. I basically just learned it by sheer abuse in those first couple of years. And I learnt more. I learnt more from a week with sailing with Paul Elstrom than I'd learnt in 3.5 years. I can tell you, Anyway, that was a marvellous experience, and so we came second in the Worlds, and the rest was history. And as I mentioned to you in our pre-recorded conversation, that following the Worlds, Paul invited me to come back to Copenhagen, because in that season, the summer of '66 in Europe, the Royal Copenhagen Yacht Club were celebrating their 200th anniversary, and they were playing host to a whole series of world and European championships in different classes. And Paul said, look, it's going to be a great summer in Copenhagen. If you want to, you feel free to come over, and you're welcome to stay with me and enjoy the summer. So, that's a good thing to do. And of course, back in those days, air travel was nothing like what it is today. It was the old 707s that came before the jumbos, and I had the opportunity to do that. And of course, 21, young, single, no money. I'd saved up enough for an airfare only, and that was all. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do a trip around the world and get over there, I need to use up as many of my friends as I can. And of course, back then, to get to Europe, going from Adelaide, it was Adelaide to Sydney, refuel, Sydney to Fiji, refuel, Fiji to Honolulu, refuel, Honolulu to San Francisco, refuel, New York, and then eventually over to London and then to Copenhagen. So it was a real milk run getting to Europe. So I wrote to Dennis Surtees, who was the American rep in the Worlds in Adelaide, and said, hey, Dennis, remember me? I sailed with Paul in the, whoops, I've just lost you. What have I done?
I've still got you. You there?
Yeah. Can you see me?
I can.
Well, that's funny. I've lost you. What have I done?
I don't know. You improve your life, probably.
Web video going on. I've touched something and cut out my camera. Well, so long as you can see me, I'll just keep on talking.
From my end, it's fine, and your end, you can do
That's a
without
bit
seeing me.
disconcerting. Just let me. Okay, help me, mate. What do I do to get the video back?
I would
I'm
go
clicking
up,
on. I'm clicking on the camera icon.
maybe up to view on the top bar.
Top view. Gosh. You're right. Oh, that's a bit sad.
Maybe you're.
Oh, there we go. I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I wrote to Dennis and said, "Remember me? I crewed for Paul in the Worlds, and I've got a trip around the world, and one of the stops is San Francisco. Would it be okay if I came and caught up with you and said hello and stayed the weekend?" And Dennis said, "Yeah, sure. Come on over. So I was planning on staying there for a weekend. And
when you're flying, you can like interrupt your flight. Like you can just sort of.
I could back in those days. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a whole different world now. Yeah.
It is.
And I had my round the world ticket gave me that flexibility. So I rocked up in San Francisco, and on the weekend I arrived there by absolute sheer coincidence. We were sailing at Alameda Air Station at a SBRA regatta, Small Boat Racing Association regatta in San Francisco, and I went up there for that event with Dennis and his crew, John Joss. And on the way up there, John said to Dennis, "Oh, Dennis, look, by the way, mate, I've just changed jobs and I can't get time off in August to do the North Americans with you." And this was in the middle of June. And it was only 6 weeks away. And Dennis said, "Oh, for God's sake, I've just been to the world and just got the new boat and new sails, and how am I going to get another crew in 6 weeks?" Oh, and he was going right off. So when we got home, I said to him, "Hey, look, Dennis, I'm not in any particular hurry to get to Europe. If you're prepared to put me up for 6 weeks, I'll stay in crew for you." He thought, "Well, geez, that'll do me." And because back in those days, I wasn't Pip Pearson, I was Elstrom's crew. So Dennis thought it was pretty cool to have Elstrom's crew crewing for him for the North Americans.
Yeah.
Well, I stayed and we won that thing hands down. And back in those days, in the 60s, you had to qualify to represent your country for the Worlds. We had a limit of 75 boats for the Worlds. And you had to qualify on the basis of the number of your country registrations.
Right.
So anyway, having won the North Americans in Palo Alto in 66, that gave us the right to represent America next year. So my initial weekend stay in San Francisco grew into be 6 weeks, and then having won the event, that ended up being a year. So I stayed in California. So so we went over to France for the Worlds, and that was a story in itself. The Le Ball Worlds, line starts, 145 boats. The starting boat was a French Navy frigate. And back in those days, the French sailing in their own waters had absolutely total disregard for the rules. It was just chaotic. Anyway, it was a great experience, and I forget where we came, but I don't know, probably somewhere in the Middle Fleet.
Right.
So then I went back to California. I came home for 2 years, went back to California again in 1970, 72. So in total, I was there from June 66 to August 68, home for a couple of years, and back in September 70 and home again in October 72. So I had 4 years living in the States, and been going there almost every year ever since.
Fantastic. And so what did you do to like for money when you were in California all those times? Were you working?
Well, don't tell your immigration department or the IRA, but I was over there just I was a wetback, if you like, just painting houses. I refused to bleed off of Dennis Jenny, so I was paying them board mind you, on reflection, I think it was a pretty cheap board, but I was doing odd jobs around the house and that for him. But yeah, look, Dennis was an anaesthetist, or as you guys say, an anesthesiologist.
Yep.
And he put a notice up on his hospital notice board in the staff room. Healthy, young, strong Australian needs work. See Dennis Surtees. Well, from that day on, I reckon I could have formed my own company. I was flat out. I was doing concreting and painting and hanging wallpaper and interior decorating. And so I'd work for a few weeks, get a bit of money, pay Jenny heaps of board in advance, and then Dennis and I'd go sailing 2 or 3 times a week. And I was living the life of Riley, I tell you. It's
Life's pretty
great
good.
experience.
That's fantastic.
And Dennis had 5 daughters, and so I instantly had 5 young sisters. When I first arrived there, the eldest, I think, was 11, and the youngest was 4.5. And the young one, the 4.5-year-old, I spent those first a couple of summers with her, teaching her to swim in a swimming pool and that. And I think she grew up with a bit of an Australian accent, actually. But no, wonderful family, and we've been very, very close friends. Well, they are family now, like so many of my other Californian friends, and which has grown to be what I constantly refer to as I don't call the international class a class. It's an international family. It really is.
Outstanding. And you stayed quite good friends with Paul Elstrom throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah, Paul and I have stayed really good friends the whole way through since '66, and every time I've gone to Europe for any sailing event, I always make sure I'd make my way through Copenhagen on the way back, or deliberately go there just to say good day, drop in for a cup of tea, and on a couple of occasions I've just stayed the night. But yeah, we've remained really good friends. Lovely family. He also had 4 girls.
Right.
All these sailors seem to have girls, and yeah, we're really very good friends. In fact, a little bit sad in the latter years when Paul went down with Parkinson's disease and he wasn't too well. I'd always still make a point of going there to say good day to him. Just 1 second.
Sure.
Got a little bit of sinus at the moment. And of course, all we do when you're our age, all you do is reminisce. And it's a funny thing. The older we got, the better we were.
Well,
Funny.
second in the world's, 4 gold medals, like.
Yeah. But it was somewhat strange. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. This is a good one. Paul turned 40 in 1968. Now, I must have been, I reckon I was still living in California, I was, that's right. And that's right. Paul was turning 40 in 1968. And I was still with Dennis in California. And he wrote to me and said, "Oh, Pip, I'm having a 40th birthday party. I think you should come over." So, oh, wow, this is too good to miss. Look, Paul Elson 40th, and he's got friends and going, this will be it's likely to be a big state party event in Copenhagen, because he's better known and more popular than the king in Denmark,
right?
Or queen it is now. So I left and went over to his birthday party in Copenhagen. Well, the party was at his house, and the guests were Pierre Pillon from France, Jack Knights, the yachting journalist from England, Hans Fogg, the guy I'd crewed for,
Sure.
crewed for him,
Yeah.
Pip Pearson, and Paul Elton. There was 5 of us. That was the party, and we just drank champagne all night.
All right.
So yeah, the bond has just stayed from there on, and as I said, in more latter years, when I'd drop in, we'd just start reminiscing. I said, "Oh, how's Jack Knights? Oh no, he died in a big boating crash. And how's Pierre? Oh no, he's dead." And all of our cohorts, every time I asked Paul a question, "Oh, Pip, he's dead," and he made this most profound statement, which has stuck with me forever. And this is maybe about, I'm guessing, 10 years ago now. He said, "Pip, you're the only friend I've got left." I thought, oh my God. back in his heyday, Paul got so hounded by the press and the media,
Yeah.
he became a bit of a recluse, and he to some extent he shunned company, which was a great shame because he was a fantastic personality, had the greatest sense of humour, and every time I went there, it was really funny. He lived in Sigwards Bay in Copenhagen down the waterfront, and I used to go down there to his gate. And I'd always ring Trina, his daughter,
Yep.
who lived there in the same house. I'd ring Trina and say, Trina, is it convenient for me to pop round and see Dad tomorrow? She said, yeah, come on down, Pip. Come on down around 2 o'clock. So I'd go down there, and as I opened the front gate, I'd see Paul's head come through the window up on his balcony, and the window had opened, and as he saw me coming through the gate, it was the same words every time. Pip, we were still the best. Yeah, no, very, very fond memories of a really great man, a great man, a great sailor, and a truly great friend.
Fantastic. So, so you mentioned you were still the best, but on paper, they gave the trophy to another quite well-known yachtsman that year. So it was Sir Jim Hardy.
Yeah.
Who I mean, like, if you gotta lose,
yeah, well,
pretty good.
Yeah, and of course Jim's a great mate. I still see Jim. Jim lives in Sydney full time now, or most of the time, but he also has an apartment here in Glenelg. And every time he comes over, we catch up, and it's a bit like the same conversation with Paul. It's all just reminiscing. But
yeah,
Jim's really good company and a great friend. And that event is really interesting. It's got under my skin a bit all my sailing life, because in that event, we got more first places than Jim. We beat Jim more times than he beat us, and yet by the nature of the scoring system, which was vastly different than what it is today,
right,
he won the event. And we always figured, because we beat him more times than he beat us, and because we got more first places than him, we figured, no, we were the best. But scoring systems are scoring systems, and he beat us by 1.5 points.
Oh, geez. Amazing. So that was the old Olympic scoring, right? Where you got like no points for first, but
there was the old Olympic scoring system, which was, I think, in first place you got something like 2,880 points, and it was a ridiculous system. And then they changed to an international system, which was I forget. Anyway, the scoring system that our organising committee used for this event hasn't been used before or since, and I think it was something like 0, 1.5, 3, 4. It wasn't quite the same as the next scoring system that stayed in place for years and years and years.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, to satisfy my concern about us having not won the event, I've since gone through the results, and under any scoring system before or since, whether the present one is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4,
right.
And then for ages it was 0, 1.5, 2 3/4, 3.5, 4, whatever, I forget now. I've calculated the results under every possible scoring system, and regardless of my bitterness, Jim beat us under every system.
Oh,
so
no way! Oh,
yeah.
That's great. Well, so I want to share my screen here for a second, because I've got two pictures here. Can you see those?
Oh, yes. Just 1 second.
So,
just
sure.
Yeah. Now, that's an iconic picture, and that really says a lot, because that picture there, if you look at what we're wearing, we're both wearing tennis shoes and socks. Paul's wearing a pair of tracksuit pants. I've got bare legs, but look at our jumpers.
Yeah.
These are the days before wetsuits.
So was it cold, or were you guys just trying to be heavy?
It was bloody cold.
Okay.
And we'd always try and wear wool next to our skin, because if you wore a cotton sweater next to your skin, cotton, when the wind's blowing through it, really gets really cold. So you'd wear wool next to your skin and then maybe load up with a couple of sweaters, because back in those days, there was no weight restrictions.
Right.
And because I was fairly small compared to Paul, we'd get out there and say, okay, Pip, over the side. So that sweater you see me wearing was one that Paul bought out. It was like an old-fashioned weight jacket. So I'd have about 4 jumpers on, sats over the water. I could barely get back into the boat.
Yeah.
Now you notice that Paul's wearing a trapeze belt as well.
I do.
This was the time Paul had just designed the trapeze dinghy,
right,
which was being very, very popular in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
And he was keen to demonstrate that a skipper could sail a boat from the trapeze. So he was doing that, and you can't see in that photograph there, but the mast in the 505 there was the mast section from his trapeze dinghy.
Okay.
And there's other photographs there that show he had a double spreader set up on it.
Sure.
to control the mast, which he did incredibly well. And I can talk for hours on this. So that was a plain straight section, no tapering. Okay. Which is a pretty ordinary mast, but the way he had it rigged with the double spreaders, he was able to control it. And the other thing is, people always say they always remember Paul Elson sailing the trapeze, sailing the boat from the trapeze. Well, he did during the Australian Championships, the pre-worlds, but never once did he do it in the worlds. Okay. Which is yeah, it was a great experience, and I can remember very clearly on the 3rd heat of the pre-worlds, there was this massive squall came through the fleet, and at the Adelaide airport they recorded 63 knots. Paul was out on the wire. I remember there's a great photograph, a helicopter shot of Larry Marks in one trough and we were in the next trough, and all you could see was above his spreaders from that photograph. The seas were so big. When we were both down in the trough, you couldn't see each other. Yeah. We were hurtling along at in these puffs of up to 60 knots, and there was only 2 boats in the entire fleet that didn't capsize. One was Jack Cassidy from Perth, who's a well-known heavy weather sailor, and the other boat that didn't capsize was Paul Elson and Pip Pearson. Nice. So one of the things that I've always heard about Paul Elstrom, you hear a lot about him, but he was once asked, "What's your favorite weather to race in?" And the story, as I hear it, was that he replied, "A storm." So that goes right along with that. That's fantastic. Unbelievable shot. So I mean, what all did you mentioned you learned more sailing from him, as I could imagine, but like what was it like? What was he like in the boat? Was he calm? Was he? Oh yeah, very calm. Yes, yeah. I was really because I'd been accustomed to sailing the previous years in my training with John Parrington. Right. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I learnt my sailing from just sheer abuse. Right. And of course, when I started sailing with Paul, I was totally ignorant. I didn't know who Paul Elson was. And when we went out and won the first 2 heats, I thought, oh, gee, this bloke seems to know what he's doing. I didn't know he won gold medals and everything. No, he was pretty good. But the one thing that sticks in my mind was that in the 2 days off between the pre-worlds and the worlds, one of the days was a social event down at Hardy's Winery. Right. And a bus trip organised, and everybody went down there. Which is, sorry to interrupt, that's Sir Jim Hardy's family operation. Yeah. Jim Hardy's family winery. Yeah. Right. And there was a bus trip to Hardy's Winery, which everybody wanted to go to. And Paul said to me, look, I don't want to go on that trip. We need to do some more training. He wasn't happy with the performance that we'd done in the pre-worlds. We were the first international boat in the pre-worlds, but we didn't win the pre-worlds. And so he was keen to go out and do a bit more tuning. So I said, yeah, that's fine by me. So of course, everybody else except a pair of the Swedes came out sailing, and so we went out against these guys and we're cruising along, and we're pretty much wiping them off the map. And I said to Paul, "Oh, Paul, we seem to be going pretty well against these guys." And Paul said to me, "Oh, Pip, don't take any notice of that. They are hopeless." I forget his name now. One of the Swedish guys. And so we'd sailed and sailed and sailed from the yacht club right up around the corner of several miles. And Paul said, "We need to go back now. Need to change mainsail." So we turned around, sailed back to shore, changed the mainsail, went out again. And honestly, we were out there for about 10 minutes. And Paul said, "No, that's it. That's what I'm looking for." Oh, hang on. Before he said that, he got me to take the helm. Well, he went up on the deck with a screwdriver and adjusted the tension on some of these upper and lower wires, came back, and we sailed off about another 3 or 4 minutes, and he said, "That's it. That's what I'm looking for." So we came ashore. So the next day was heat 1 of the worlds. Well, it was almost flat calm. In fact, it was so calm, downwind. I've done it again. Downwind, just a minute, I'll bring you back again. Downwind, he had me sitting on the deck in front of the mast. He was adamant that in light weather, you had to have the transom out of the water. So heat 1, it was in about I don't know, 3 or 4 knots barely, and we won it. Well, then the big change came in overnight, and the next day too was something about 18 to 25 knots, and we won that one too. Oh, geez, he really seems to know what he's doing. That's pretty good. So that really impressed me that he had the ability then that no one else I've ever sailed with had that ability. He could go out and just tell by feel what was right.
Incredible. That's awesome. So,
Yeah.
so that's amazing history. But you've done a lot of stuff in the class, with the class, for the class since then, and I want to hit some of that. So you've sailed in, I'm sure I don't have the right number, but you've sailed in dozens of worlds, right?
Yeah, not as many as Howie Hamlin. Look, let's see. I did the 66 worlds, the 67 worlds, the 66, 67, 72, 76, 78, Copenhagen. And then we had the worlds come back to Adelaide again in 1983.
Right.
And in 1983, after that, I'd spent about, I reckon almost 8 months prior to that, almost full time, helping organise all that. And I was exhausted after that. Right. At that time, I had a couple of businesses as a farm and a young family. So I took time off from sailing for several years. And then my next trip back on the international scene was the 92 Worlds at Santa Cruz.
Right, okay.
So between 83 and 90, I had about 7 years off. In 92, I came back to world scene again at Santa Cruz, and I've done all the Santa Cruz Worlds ever since.
All right. So so going back to 83 real quickly, the Australian team swept the podium at that Worlds. And
yeah, that was Terry Kerwood. Yeah.
And half the people on the podium had the name Kerwood.
Yes.
So what was in the water there going on?
Well, the Kerwood brothers, Jeff and Terry, they actually sailed, I think it's 16 and 17-year-old kids in the Worlds in Adelaide in 66. And, you know, weighing a full 140, 150 pounds or something. It was a different world in those days, mate. It really was. And then following that experience, they went home with the help of their dad. They decided, look, these boats are really nice. We're going to start building them. And then they were building fast boats and then shipping them all over the world, as Parker had done in the previous era.
Right.
And they were, in order to promote their boats, they were going to the Worlds, and they were very, very competent sailors. And to his credit, Terry won the Worlds with Reg Crick as his crew in '83. And I think Jeff was Jeff third, the brother?
Yeah.
They've always been up there.
Yeah, but and with another brother.
Yeah. There was no. For years and years, the two brothers sailed together, and then they separated and had two boats. And then Reg Crick crewed for Terry for years, and Jeff had his dad Bob crewing for him.
Dad.
For a long
Okay,
time.
got it.
Oh yeah. The other Kurd was Bob. So, son Jeff and father Bob sailed together, and Terry had Reg Crick crewing for him.
That's pretty awesome. So the 92 World, well, I mean, we got a lot that ties in there. So Holty last time told a story about how he was desperate to get a Kurd boat.
Yeah.
And Colin Merritt wouldn't pick up his phone, so he had to wait a while to get one. But then the 92 Worlds where you came back was pretty impactful for Holty. But that is one of the, I mean, certainly among the people that I am friends with and know, that was one of the all-time Worlds. That was
a great event. That was a fantastic event.
So my friends Nick and Mike, who we were talking about before, that was their first Worlds. They did pretty well at that. Carl Smith, who sails with Holty now, that was his first Worlds. And it was like blowing the dogs off the chain every day, and beautiful sunshine and big epic waves. And another Australian one.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And we had, prior to that, of course, there was the 1970 Worlds in Santa Cruz that I sailed with Dennis Surtees.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was the one that we should have won. Like, we dominated the whole way through, and we got a broken rudder gudgeon in the fourth race, which cost us the Worlds.
And they had no throwouts then, right?
Yes, we always had a throwout, I'm pretty sure. But because of the results.
Yeah.
But there were several people in that event. There's about three of us. Rod Dalglish from Australia. He broke a main-headed in one race. And if that hadn't happened to him, he could have probably won the Worlds.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of Swedish guys who, one of them got hit by another boat, or he fell on his ribs and broke the ribs. And had that not happened, he would have won the Worlds. And the English guys, the Farrant brothers, ended up winning almost by default. But nevertheless, they hung in there and they won the Worlds. That was also a fantastic series. Now, you've probably heard of John Bertrand, the Australian John Bertrand, who was the America's Cup sailor that stole the cup from you guys. Well, he was on his way home from the East Coast. He'd been over studying at MIT.
Yeah, he was at MIT.
Yeah, John, he was at MIT, and he did his thesis over there, and his thesis was the relationship between a mainsail and a mast. So he's a pretty switched on guy. He's only a young guy then.
Right.
Anyway, on his way back to Australia, he stopped over in California, and he crewed for Dick Deaver, who was the manager of the North Loft in Long Beach. And I think he beat us by 2 places in that, whatever. But that was a fantastic series. But 92 was also, they've always been good at Santa Cruz.
Well, we're going back, so.
Yeah.
Right on. That's great. I'm looking forward to that. And gotta take it.
So I'll just call these guys back later. Yep.
So, so you've sailed, as far as I can see, you've done more sailing, and from what you've said, you've done more sailing with Americans and people from other
I have.
countries than Australians.
I have. Yeah, I've sailed worlds with Paul Elstrom from Denmark, Dennis Surtees from the States, Rob Napier from England,
Ali?
Ali Mellor from the States, and that was a great experience with Ali. I did the 99 Worlds in Quiberon with Ali, and then again in 2002 in Perth, I think, with Ali. I've done the 96 and 98 Worlds with Malcolm Higgins from here. And Malcolm Higgins would be one of the best guys I've ever been in a boat with, a very, very talented sailor.
And still at it.
It's a pity he's Sandy Higgins' older brother. A brilliant sailor. He's won, I think, 8 Australian Sharpie National Championships. And it's a pity that he's a doctor and tied up with work, because if he chose to become a professional sailor, he'd be one of the best. Then of course you've heard of the Nicholson brothers. Well, they won the Worlds in 04 in Santa Cruz. They've won 3 Worlds.
They won in 92 in Santa Cruz, and then they won, I think, one in South Africa and one in Australia.
Yep, they did. So did they win 92 in Santa Cruz?
Yeah, really won it.
So who won 04 in Santa Cruz?
Morgan Larson and
of course,
Trevor Bayless.
Morgan and yeah. I'm getting early Alzheimer's.
I would say probably not. So another thing that you've done in the class is you've spent seemingly half your life as the international class president.
Yeah, well, I made a mistake when I was in Santa Cruz in 92 at the annual general meeting. I made the mistake of opening my mouth too much and being a bit vocal on some of the issues.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to Les Everett, the secretary, after the meeting. He said, I think we probably need people like you. Would you be prepared to put your hand up? So I did. So I was elected president at the Worlds in Mounts Bay in 1995. And then from then on, it became my full-time hobby.
So had you been Australian president or any other office?
Well, all my life I've been involved in committees, through the lacrosse club.
Yep.
When I was younger, and I'd been Australian president of the 505 Association a couple of times, and I was president of the Australian section prior to having our Worlds in Adelaide in '83.
Right. Okay.
So I've always had my hand in admin.
So if you were such a loudmouth, and I say that endearingly because I'm one too, what was your agenda? Like what did you want to see changed? What wasn't happening?
Honestly, I didn't have an agenda, and I didn't really want to see anything change, but I just thought I could shed some of my experience, if you like, without sounding too egotistical. But the role of president, the international body, is really just an overseeing body, and it's basically a steering committee, because the guts of the association operates at local and national level. And an international body where you've got a president in Australia and a secretary and a treasurer in England, a committee like that, it's a bit like a federal government. It's a bit hard to operate efficiently. Yeah. All the action has got to happen at grassroots level.
Okay.
And so you just try and encourage that and promote the right atmosphere. And the thing that I specialised in, if you like to call it a specialisation, I made it my point of when I was president, at any major regatta, I'd walk around the boat park and make sure that I knew everybody and everybody knew me, so that the class officials weren't just some mysterious group of committee people that they never knew or met.
Yep.
And I tried to be, which I think I did quite successfully, become the international diplomat.
That's great. But all that said about the class being run at the local and national level, which, you know, I think is certainly valid. You were wearing the international president hat when the biggest change that the class has really had since design came through, which is the big spinnakers.
Well, that's the one thing I really can hang my hat on. The Germans and the Swedes were doing a lot of experimentation with a bigger spinnaker, and they figured this was the way to go, but it had to get international approval. So we gave it a couple of years trial prior to 2000, and I went out on the limb and had my local sailmaker build me a large spinnaker here. And then as a result of those trials, the International Committee made the decision and it was approved in an AGM. So none of this was sort of dictatorial. It was all done by an AGM vote. In order to progress this further, because a lot of people are reluctant to change, and so many of the good guys who had tried this said, oh, this is fantastic. But of course, a lot of the middle fleet and the also-rans, they don't want to go to the expense of getting a new spinnaker, or they're happy what the boat is. They didn't want to change it. So there was a bit of reluctance to change, but all the good guys were thinking, no, look, this is the way to go. So as I said, I got my sailmaker to make me one, and I was the first one in Australia to have one. And the very first time I put it up, it was on opening day at our season. I forget what year it was, but it's probably around 2000 and maybe it's 1999 or early 2000 before we went to South Africa for the Worlds. And it just blew my mind. And I couldn't believe how much better the boat handled with a big spinnaker. But I was a bit concerned about the females who haven't got the same physical strength as the blokes, how they handle it. And I took a lot of advice from Angela Stenger in Germany. It's Gus with her because she'd tried it. She said, oh, Pip, it's fantastic. It's actually easier than the small spinnaker. The small spinnaker, it's just so hard. So I thought, that's good enough for me. So at the AGM in 2000, I pretty much rammed it down their throats, singing its praises, how good it was. I said, listen, I'm probably the oldest guy in the fleet. If I reckon it's fantastic, you younger guys can handle it. And I quoted Angela Sting and all the others. And I said, look, we've got to look to the future. Let's go for it. And I'm pretty sure the minutes record that it was a unanimous vote at the Worlds in South Africa in Durban in 2000. And I think Ali Miller often says it was only a unanimous vote because Pip Pearson rammed it down their throats. So yeah, look, if I can hang my hat on anything at all in the past, I think yes, I think my efforts and the coercion can be credited with bringing in the big spinnaker, and it really has transformed the boat.
I mean, there aren't all that many people around who really, it was a while ago. There's a lot of people who've been in the class for a long time, but there are certainly some people who never sailed a boat with the old spinnaker. I did a bit of it. There's nobody I've come across who thinks it's a bad thing. I mean, certainly everybody, it's a fantastic boat to sail. It's kept itself relevant and exciting and challenging, and it's that. So that was, thank you. That was a great change. You should have rammed that down the throat. And
well
played.
There's two lasting memories that stick in my mind, and over the many years that I've been involved, I'm constantly meeting people, the likes of a Peter Allery and the likes of Paul Elstrom's and the likes of Dennis Surtees and the likes of the Farrant brothers in England. And around the bar, when you're just mixing socially and casually talking, and you say to these guys, "Hey, listen, guys, you've been around a long time. You've sailed in lots of boats. What's the most enjoyable boat you've ever sailed?" Almost to a T, every single person, 99.9% of people will say, "Oh, the best boat I've ever sailed is a 505." No question about it.
No question.
And then what another line that sticks in my mind, in the Worlds in Townsville in 1996, we had a race there for some of the oldies, and Jim Hardy came up and sailed. And I remember I was walking down the corridor of one of the hotels with Jim, and I said to Jim, "Hey Jim, tell me, mate, since the 505 Worlds, you've gone off and you've done the America's Cup and the Fastnet races and Admiral's Cup races and big boat racing. Have I missed out on something in my sailing life by not moving on to bigger boats?" And Jim turned around and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Pip, mate," he said, "this is where it's at in dinghy sailing. You haven't missed a thing." I said, "That's good enough for me. I'll just keep on doing it."
Right on.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then
so I've just made it my life to be involved in 505 racing, and as Paul said in his book, I think Expert Dinghy Sailing, it's the most enjoyable boat he's ever sailed.
Yep.
And despite all the developments of all these new factory boats in the last 40, 50 years, there's still no boat ever been designed that can go from 5 knots to 30 knots like a 505.
It's true.
It's just the most wonderful design. It really is.
Agree fully. Awesome. So going back to the presidency, you go the big spinnaker route. Then you handed the presidency off to Ali, right?
Yep.
And then you take it back.
Yes.
What kind of sick nut are you?
Now, I don't think it went from Ali to me. It went from Ali to Tom Boland in Denmark.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of issues there that I can't discuss.
Noted.
But when we were having the Worlds back in Adelaide again in 2007, I thought for funding purposes, it'd be a big advantage to get it'd be much easier for me to arrange and get sponsorship if I had the prestige of being international president.
Got it.
And so I spoke to Tom Boland about it, and he totally agreed and he's happy to stand down. So at the AGM in, I think it was Hailing Island in 2006, I took over again. So I was president for the Worlds in 2007. And honestly, that did work a treat, because that's when I was able to first pick up the sponsorship from SAP.
Oh, so that's you.
Yeah. Howie Hamlin introduced me to Hasso Plattner in the boat park at Warramunda in 2005. And in about a 6-minute conversation with Hasso Plattner, I had the sponsorship for the 505 Worlds for 2007. And it went on from there.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So, and that, I mean, that just ended, right? I mean, that's one of the longest sponsorships.
Wow. Yeah. And yeah, I'm not quite sure. It got difficult.
I mean, you can, they spent a ton of money and they probably got something out of it.
Oh, yeah. They were very happy with it. Oh, yes. I was a bit concerned that we were the minor boys in their play, because they used to sponsor Andy Roddick in the tennis.
Yeah.
Some Circle Soleil stuff. The tennis. Oh,
they do F1. They're
Ernie Els in the golf.
Yeah.
There was tennis. Golf, Circle Soleil. There's another sport, and sailing. And we suited their corporate image very well, because yacht racing is a clean, green sport, fresh air, amateur organisation,
Right.
and it really suited their corporate image. And at one stage, I was a bit concerned about us being a minor sport compared to other things that were involved in. And I was put right by one of their hierarchy in San Francisco. No, Pip, mate, you got it all wrong. You guys are up there in the top shelf with us. So that was interesting to hear.
That is.
Yeah.
But you know, when they still have a lot of replays from the worlds from, you know, that era on YouTube, and you watch the analytics that go on, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's you know, you can see who's crossed. Like it's great. I mean, it's still like I watch him on the treadmill.
Yacht racing coverage has developed so much since then. When we had the Worlds in Aarhus in 2010, San Francisco 09, Aarhus 210.
Yeah.
That was the first time there'd been any live streaming on the internet of yacht racing, and it was fantastic. It was fantastic.
Cool.
And went on from there. And of course, you look at the technology now, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
And that's all been developed by, you know, initially the SAP guys.
Yeah. That's
the money. The money they gave us. Excuse me again. The money they gave us to help run the event, the admin stuff, was fantastic from our point of view. But what they did at their own expense with promoting the event and all the internal stuff, mate, you couldn't count it.
I mean, they had pro commentator teams there the whole time, and a nice, booth set up. It was
all the backroom technology guys. And,
oh my God!
You know, I think at the Worlds in San Francisco in 09, they had a team of 7 or 8 development people there the whole time. He's working on this full time. Like, holy moly, you know.
That's cool.
No, it's been great. And yacht racing as a sport has benefited enormously from that. And that all started from the conversation with Hasso Platinum in the boat park in Warnemünde in 2005.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, Pip, this has been fantastic. I don't want to keep your whole day. Wonderful conversation. This has been so fun.
And let me just in closing say that now that I'm older and retired from sailing, apart from my continued excitement about the boat, and as you're starting to get to know now, the other common thread that I've found over the last 50 years, which I think is fairly unique, we all think that the class we race is the best class in the world. That's just human nature. But I haven't come across any organisation that's got the camaraderie of the 505 class internationally. We see ourselves in one massive family. We're all bloody good mates.
It's true.
And there's no secrets. You know, as you covered with Holty, his freedom of information, you know, if you're winning, you don't keep a secret. You tell the next guys how to do it as well. And I'll give a lot of credit to Howie Hamlin for developing their Team Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that Team Tuesdays down there in California.
Yep.
And, you know, try lifting the bar, and you lift the bar for everybody. And you make great friendships along the way.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you can't argue with it. It's just, it's really neat. So now you're retired from the class, but we're going to see you in Santa Cruz in 2 years, right?
Yeah, I would expect so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
We'll count on
hopefully it. I'll get that full body transplant in the meantime. Yeah, I had a couple of shoulder reconstructions a couple of years ago. My knees have gone, and if I tried to get on a trapeze again, I'd end up in casualty ward. But a few years ago, I bought myself a rib. So, you know, in most recent years, I've been driving the gate boat for the starts. We put my rib in the container. We took it to Barbados. I did the world starts over there. The same in Port Elizabeth. We put my rib in the container. We went I did the starts over there. So
I think you take a bigger beating in the rib than you do in the boat.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
But more importantly, that sort of keeps me in touch with the class and keeps me in touch with the people, and it's still my my lifetime enjoyment factor being involved in the 505 scene.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I have to thank Holty for a lot of stuff, but for suggesting you, that was such a coup. I'm so glad we did this. It's been so much fun. Final two questions.
Yep.
You've got a lot to choose from, but what's your favorite 50 sailing memory?
Mate, there's so many. Look, I've sailed with so many great people and had so many great experiences.
You get to cheat. Everybody picks a couple.
Yeah, but I guess in all honesty, for some reason, I'm not quite sure why it is, but it's something to do with your brain. But the memories you have when you're younger seem to be predominant in many things in life. But with my first years of sailing from 60 up to, well, when I sailed with Paul in 66, when I'd learnt so little, and then sailing with Paul in that one series learnt so much, and that developed so much. And I think the one moment that stands out in my life more than anything else was the third heat of the pre-worlds in Adelaide in 66, in those massive gusts when the whole fleet got annihilated, and we stayed afloat and we didn't even look like capsizing. And that's the one journey that stands out in my mind above everything else. And that series was fantastic, because one thing I didn't mention earlier, when we had that World Series in Adelaide in 1966, that was a coup for Australian yacht racing. That was the first time a World Series of any class of yachts had been held in the Southern Hemisphere.
No kidding.
Yeah. So that was really a one-off.
Huh.
And the publicity we had for that, and the crowd, we had crowds along the beach. We had loudspeakers on the telegraph poles down the road, commentating on their roundings and positions. Like, it was like a major football event. It was amazing. Yeah, it was really good. So yeah, look, but 1970 Santa Cruz Worlds with Dennis, even though we didn't win it, that was a fantastic event. Look, it goes on and on and on. But you asked me for the most predominant memory. The most predominant memory is that third race of the pre-world in 66.
I love it. I love it. And then the final question is, you get to pick the next guest. So who's our next guest?
Now, do you need an answer right now?
Well, I think we can cut you a little slack on that, and I'll come back to it with you.
Yeah, well, I can give that a little bit of thought. Whoops, hang on, I'll cut you off again just a minute.
Uh-oh.
I'll keep on touching my mouse. Now, on those last six, Peter Ellery was number one.
Number one.
Who was second?
Was Ethan Bixby.
Ethan, yeah.
And
Three.
then Macy Nelson.
Macy, yeah. Four.
Eric Anderson.
Oh, Eric, yeah.
Reeve.
And then Reeves.
And then Mike Holt.
Didn't you do Reeves Dunn?
Reeve was before Mike Holt.
Yeah, Reeves and Holty, right. So,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, but I was just thinking who would be the most appropriate. And
anybody.
And I'm thinking Howie Hamden's probably had the broadest range of experience of anybody, from being a long-haired blonde kid on the beach of Long Beach to actually building 505s and getting Larry Tuttle to come across from the East Coast to the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And with his range, I don't think anybody's done more worlds than Howie. And I'm tossing up between Howie and Mike Martin. Mike might be a bit more eloquent than Howie as far as public speaking and that goes, but I think as far as experience, if you can get him, I reckon Howie.
I think it's great, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about when Howie would be on the podcast. It's inevitable, right? Obviously, he's
Yeah.
going to be one of the picks. But to have you nominate him like that, I think is perfect. So we'll go with that.
Okay,
That
beauty.
happen. All right.
Okay, Dave.
Fantastic. Pip, this
Nice
has
talking
been
to you,
so
mate.
much fun. I can't wait to see you in Santa Cruz.
Okay, all the
All right.
best.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.